Shana Tova. On behalf of my family, I want to wish all of you a year that is filled with goodness and sweetness. After we hear the shofar blasts again today, we will sing Hayom Harat Olam. Today the world is born. Today's Torah reading begins with birth 2, the miracle of Isaac, born to Sarah in her old age, and the Haftarah tells of the birth of Shmuel, his once barren mother Hannah. When a child is born, there are endless possibilities. What shape will this child's life take? On Rosh Hashanah, we're invited to open ourselves to that same tremendous possibility and potential. What shape will our lives take on in the new year as it's being born? No matter what happened in the past year, we're called by the shofar to imagine what a more meaningful and authentic life is possible ahead of us. We call our high holiday prayer book a machzor, which means cycle, because this whole month of holidays is just that, a cycle of renewal and rebirth. On Rosh Hashanah, the 100 blasts of the shofar and many hours of praying initiates us into this cycle. 10 days later on Yom Kippur, we're fasting and being cleansed by the divine love and forgiveness. And 15 days from now, under the full moon of Sukkot, we will be surrounded by the divine presence in the form of a sukkah. And we'll shake the 4 plants that are native to the land of Israel while praying for rain and blessings. And finally, in 3 weeks, will be the grand crescendo, the ultimate New Year's party. On Simchat Torah, we will dance ecstatically right here in circles around the Torah. We'll have a 9-piece band up here and celebrate the completion of the Torah's annual cycle, reading the last column and then rolling back to the beginning. But this year, the holidays feel different. This year, everything feels different. Simchat Torah literally means the joy of the Torah. Last year, when the time came to celebrate the completion of one Jewish story, we were at the beginning of a very different one. On October 7th, 2023, as we gathered here in this sanctuary, the deadliest and most brutal attack on Jews since the Holocaust had just unfolded in Israel. I remember many congregants asking me that day, as our 9-piece klezmer simcha band was hesitantly warming up on the bima, how can we celebrate on a day like this? The bat mitzvah girl and her family were standing in the middle of the sanctuary looking a little nervous. How can we dance after what just happened to our people? Simcha? The joyful energy of the day is in its name, simcha, and yet everyone had a pit in their stomach, and everyone was short of breath. Based on the facts of Jewish history, I wondered how many times Simchat Torah must have been celebrated under the shadow of violence and fear. I remembered the writings of Rabbi Kalonymus Kalman Shapira, the Rebbe of the Warsaw Ghetto during the Holocaust, and the teaching that he gave on Purim. He made a connection between the holiday of Purim and Yom Kippurim, as it's called in the Torah. Yom Kippurim can be translated to mean the day that is Kippurim, like Purim. He taught that just as you're obligated to fast on Yom Kippur, whether or not it feels like the right thing to do, unless, of course, you have a medical condition, in which case you're commanded to eat, but otherwise, no matter what, you're supposed to fast. So too on Purim, we're obligated to find joy, whether or not we find ourselves in the Warsaw Ghetto. We cannot, he said, be defined by our outside circumstances, however real and terrifying they may be. The Torah reminds us, he said, that we are more than our fear. The timelessness of the Torah lifts us up beyond our current situation, and it reminds us that our story, the story of the Jewish people, is much larger than any particular moment in history. I thought of how his words must have brought great comfort to his community. that even in the Warsaw Ghetto, there was the possibility of transmuting darkness into light. And I think about how in 1965, Elie Wiesel described visiting Russia on Simchat Torah. As he watched young Soviet Jews dance around the Torah in public, despite the threat of the KGB, he wrote, "Our Jewish youth refuse to inherit their elders' terror. Let the local press deride them. Let their oppressors implode with anger. They refuse to be robbed of their Jewishness and have their annual yontif beneath the open skies ruined." Even in the USSR, they were able to find seeds of light amidst the darkness. Last year on Simchat Torah, I called everyone together and I said, our brothers and sisters in Israel cannot dance around the Torahs, so we must dance. It will be our form of prayer. As we dance with the Torah, touch and kiss and lift up the tree of life at the center of our circle, it will be our prayer of strength and light that will ripple out to the greater circle of the Jewish people and out to the whole world. Even on October 7th, 2023, surely the darkest day in recent Jewish history, we could not let the darkness overwhelm us and prevent us from doing our holy work. Since then, I've heard from so many of you who fear for family and friends in Israel. Far too many Shabbatot we've cried together while singing Achenu, our brothers and sisters, which is the traditional prayer for the return of hostages. And still today, 362 days later, 97 of them are still in the tunnels, if they are even still alive. Now, I've also felt and the hurt and distress from beloved members of our community who cannot bear the fact that while Israel attempts to eliminate the threat of Hamas and Hezbollah, innocent people, innocent Palestinians, are being harmed and killed, far too many. And some of my Jewish brothers and sisters have expressed to me their anger and sadness that there even is a Jewish state at all, that all nation states should be dissolved, and Israel should go first. I can't begin to tell you how difficult the past year has been for the Jewish leaders, myself included. As Hamas and Israel waged war in Gaza, conflict was raging in the diaspora too. This year, the Burlington LGBTQ Pride Parade was led by an ocean of Palestinian flags, along with a huge banner that declared Jews for free Palestine. I too want Palestinians to have freedom, dignity, and safety. But as I watched the march, I reflected on the fact that it would be impossible to be openly queer or openly Jewish and marching with a flag in the Middle East, unless you live in Israel. A few groups behind them, there we were, Ohavei Tzedek and Temple Sinai, waving our rainbow Jewish star flags and blowing the shofar. We were singing songs about building the world with chesed, with love and kindness, in the face of a very painful fracturing in the Jewish community and the Jewish family. I spoke to many Jews who were so distressed about the conflict that they chose not to march in the Pride Parade that day at all. What could I say to comfort and empower my congregants, young and old, who are afraid to be visibly Jewish in public, let alone say they supported Israel? When someone insisted that October 7th was justified because Israel is a genocidal colonialist regime, how can I respond without letting anger poison my words? I know from my deep knowledge of history and from the depths of my soul that the Jews are an ancient indigenous language, tradition, and people returning to our homeland. So how should I respond to those who say that we don't belong there at all? I know the vast majority of Israelis want to live peacefully with their neighbors in the Middle East, a region where Jewish and Christian history and presence have been systematically erased by Islamist extremists. How should Israelis respond when terrorist armies openly state their willingness to sacrifice their lives and the lives of their own people in order to eradicate the Jewish state and the Jewish people? As the Israeli author Amos Oz of blessed memory put it, what would you do if your neighbor across the street sits down on the balcony, puts his little boy on his lap, and starts shooting machine gun fire into your nursery? As a rabbi and as a Jew, I'm committed to teaching that every human being is created in the image of God. So how do I respond when I listen to Jews who are so blinded by their righteous rage that they refuse to acknowledge the suffering of Palestinian civilians? How do I attend to all the facets of the conflict with wisdom, loving kindness, and integrity, as I feel obligated to do? Often in the thick of this difficult year, I could not imagine how to even begin. The Netivot Shalom, a treasured Hasidic rabbi from Jerusalem, wrote that Rosh Hashanah is not about judging the previous year. It's about looking forward to the future. Unlike on Yom Kippur, on Rosh Hashanah, there's no vidui confessional prayer, no ashamnu, bagadnu, no al chet for the sin we've committed, no mention of the past year, no looking backward. Rosh Hashanah is about God's decision to lovingly continue the project of creation. And today, we are renewing our commitment to creating and living, really living, the best life of our lives by aligning ourselves with the will of our Creator. In our prayers today and in the 100 blasts of the shofar, we're announcing that in spite of 12 months of individual failures, and in spite of how much hardships our people collectively faced and the world faced in the last year, we've all agreed together with God to not give up on this sacred project called life. We've agreed to write ourselves into the book of life. Now, returning to the Torah and Haftarah readings today, to the miraculous births of Isaac and Shmuel, we return to the possibility, the power of possibility. What will this new year bring, and what will we bring to it? On this day, we face forward. Instead of looking back and focusing on avenging the wrongs of the past, what if all the nations of the world turned their focus to face forward? What if all nations concentrated only on building a brighter future for their children? What possibilities for peace and prosperity could we imagine then? Our Machzor, our prayer book, our guide to this cycle of time, speaks endlessly on Rosh Hashanah about crowning God as the Melech HaOlam, the ruler of the universe. In the Musaf service today, there are 3 sections, the first of which, Malchuyot, is about crowning God King, an acknowledgement that ultimately we are not in control. You don't necessarily need to believe in God to connect with that concept. When we're mindful of our smallness in relation to the oceans and the mountains, in relation to the millennia that have come before us, and the eons of time that will stretch on after us, we're acknowledging that there's something awesome and transcendent about this world. We know that it is bigger than anything we can imagine, and that it is all simultaneously contained within us, as we are B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, a fractal image of the greater whole, each one of us. The Piasetzner Rebbe, the Rebbe of the Warsaw Ghetto, teaches that instead of attempting to find God out there in the great beyond, Rosh Hashanah is an opportunity to seek deep inside of oneself through quieting the mind, to have an encounter with Shekhinah, the feminine divine presence, the part of God that dwells inside of me. Maybe, he says, maybe that creator energy that's judging me today, it's not actually out there, but it's really in me. Maybe it's all happening inside of us. The Hebrew word for prayer, lehitpalel, is self-reflexive. The Jewish prayer, that means it's something you do to yourself. And the root letters of the word, hitpalel, palal, mean to judge. So as Jews, when we pray, we're to look inward and do a self-assessment. Today we ask ourselves, am I ready to step forward and stand before the King, to step into my higher self this year? The Torah calls this day Yom Zichron Tru'ah, the day of remembering the sound of the shofar. Today we listen deeply and we try to remember the sound of our inner voice, our inner shofar, the voice of our higher self, calling us to change and grow to our full potential. Here at the head of the year, we pause and we stand and we listen. We do a lot of praying, but really the mitzvah of today is to listen. Can you hear that inner shofar inside, asking, do I really want to live? Before I can ask my Creator for another year of life, first I must ask myself, do I want to live? Really live this year? Here at the head of the year, we listen and we remember to who we truly are and who we might become. And though we often think of memory as a glance in the rearview mirror, on Rosh Hashanah, memory is the map to where we want to go. During the Israel-Hamas war in 2014, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory asked, is this it? After all the tears and tragedies of the past, do we still have to live in fear? Is Jewish history Groundhog Day? Do things never change? To which I think one of the answers, he says, is the key word of this time of the Jewish year. Teshuvah, repentance. Teshuvah tells us that history can change because we can change. Our character is not pre-programmed in our genes. We can actually act differently tomorrow than we did yesterday. Yesterday's enemies can be tomorrow's friends. It happened between Israel and Germany, Israel and Egypt, Israel and Jordan. History can change because we can change, and we are the makers of history. Uteshuva, utefila, utedaka can avert the evil decree. There's nothing inevitable in the affairs of humankind. The greatest gift God gave us was the ability to change. Jews never accept defeat. Because of that, after all the hammer blows of history, we're still undefeated. We say teshuva means repentance, but the word literally means to return. However, we can't return to a place unless we know that it exists, and we can't get there unless we know the way. So we begin by remembering who we are and where we came from. Tshuva always starts from that place where we feel like it's impossible. And yet our ancestors left us with an eternal promise that there is an endless capacity for new realities and new paradigms to evolve and emerge. Our sages taught that teshuva, returning to the land of your soul, remembering who you really are, is in fact the thing that makes creation possible. If you told a Jewish prisoner at Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in 1944 that there would be within 4 years an independent Jewish state recognized by the United Nations, the nations of the world, and that one of its strongest allies would become Germany, not only would they not have believed you or maybe slapped you in the face, but they likely could not have even imagined the possibility. As Israel defangs Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and eventually topples their supreme leader, the Ayatollah of Iran, we see not only Israelis celebrating, but crowds of brave Lebanese, Syrian, and Iranian people dancing in the streets too. With the power of tshuva, we can boldly imagine that someday the Arab and the Persian world will come to see Israel as a partner in helping them to stabilize, strengthen, and unite the Middle East. With messianic vision, can we glimpse beyond the fog of this war to a time when the children of Isaac, the Jews, and the children of Ishmael, the Muslims, who were separated from each other in our Torah reading today, will someday have an Abrahamic family reunion? And can we imagine for ourselves, for the Jewish people, a future where even with our sometimes painful differences among our own people, that we can do the hard work of listening to each other, hearing each other's stories, perspectives, and pain, rather than just canceling the people whom we disagree with? Can we imagine listening with curiosity in order to understand better, rather than judge and critique? When we look to our most precious shared heritage, the Torah, we see that the Jewish people have never done well when we adopt an us versus them attitude. Including the book of Genesis, story after story teaches us that when we are pitted against each other, it ends in tragedy. Can we remember that we are an extended family with a shared covenant, a shared history, and a shared future? Can the Jewish people use that memory to inspire us as we continue to forge ahead, doing the hard but necessary work of Tikkun Olam, repairing the brokenness? On Simchat Torah, at the end of this high holiday cycle, we will read the last column of the Torah parchment, telling of Moses' death while the Israelites are poised to enter the Promised Land. And then we will wind the Torah all the way back to creation and begin again. Why do we read the first book as soon as we finish the last? Abigail Pogerbrin, the author of My Jewish Year 18 Holidays, One Wandering Jew, answers. She says, the Jewish people have never let the enemy author our last chapter. Torah is its own propellant and engine. We always proceed. Since October 7th, Simchat Torah will undoubtedly forever be embedded as a ritual of defiance. We return to Genesis no matter what. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. As we enter this time of the creation of the world, our first act must be to look into the dark waters of chaos that were unleashed in the past year and have the courage to say, "Let there be light." On Rosh Hashanah, the shofar calls us to join our Creator in renewing each day with light and to join God in the holy work of separating that light from the darkness. We are an eternal people. We do post-traumatic growth really well, better than any other people in history, because we never stop remembering and telling our story. On Tuesday night, Iran fired over 180 ballistic missiles at Israel, the largest aerial attack in history. And thanks to God, and thanks to America, the Iron Dome defense system, and thanks to all the Israeli bomb shelters and warning systems, there were only 3 minor injuries, and sadly 1 Palestinian man died. An Israeli friend of mine, Akiva Gersh, posted recently on social media that when this war is over, we're going to have to add a new book to the Hebrew Bible for the first time in about 2,500 years for all the miracles and all the things that have happened in the past year. 3 weeks from now, we will complete this machzor, this cycle of rebirth. As we gather here in this sanctuary for Simchat Torah, we will hug the Torah close to our hearts in the center of the circle. Little children will be bouncing up and down on their parents' shoulders. Older children, teens, and adults will be running furiously in circles around the tree of life. And our elders will be standing at the perimeter, clapping joyously with a view of the whole thing. Walking, running, dancing in concentric circles around the tree of life. That is exactly what our people have been doing all along, ever since we stood together in that giant circle around the foot of Mount Sinai. However, as we enter another year, another dance around the sun, let us remember that we're not doomed to just go in circles. Jewish time is like the shape of the round challah and the shape of the shofar. It's an unfurling spiral, always going deeper and deeper, always reaching higher and higher. The one who said, "Let there be light," is inviting us right now at the head of the year to circle up and gather in the scattered holy sparks to rebuild little Jerusalem of Vermont and usher in a future that will be brighter than we can even imagine. Shana Tova, good Yantif.